In relation to the sale itself, Taoiseach, can you give the underlying reason as to the necessity for the sale of the 25.1%? And can you indicate to me, Taoiseach, whether you have seen sight of the NIRIS report? This was a report commissioned early in February between Aer Lingus and IAG, and it compares the airline to its low-cost one, Vueling and EasyJet, and says that Aer Lingus has a 40% higher cost base. And essentially, the report identifies job cuts in following areas as part of cost reduction phase 1. Now, this report, I understand, hasn't been published or anything like that, and it's confidential, and we've received some information in relation to it. But it talks about ground handling cuts of 20%, catering 40%, maintenance 15%, and heavy maintenance would go to the Eastern European 25%. Did you, Taoiseach, and did the Minister receive a copy of that report before you took your decision? And furthermore, Taoiseach, can you answer me what happens after the 7 years in terms of the regional airports, Shannon and Cork, and the Heathrow slots? Because I believe that strategically the regions will be weaker ultimately and over time as a result of this sale. And in particular, the lack of any guarantees to the slots after the 7 years. And finally, Taoiseach, can you indicate whether there was any contact with the European Union Commission in relation to the capacity of the government on its own, with this so-called B share, to actually veto the sale of the slots, particularly because my understanding is that the government on its own can't, under EU competition law.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Thank you, Concola. I reject Deputy Martin's assertion of treating the Dáil with contempt. In fact, the opportunity is now over the next 2 days for every member to have their opportunity to comment and have their say in respect of the government decision which was taken last evening. The reason that I didn't answer questions in any great detail yesterday was because the government was meeting on the issue and had not concluded its deliberations. And I did point out to you that the government hoped to make a decision and arrive at a conclusion yesterday evening, which it did. And immediately afterwards, government, through the Minister for Transport, issued its statement. I point out to you, Deputy Martin, that this matter has been the subject of quite a deal of discussion at the Committee on Transport already, by way of Dáil questions, leaders' questions, priority questions here over the last number of months. I did not see the report that you refer to. I did not see the report that you refer to. Neither did the Minister for Transport see that report. It's an internal Aer Lingus document. What has happened here has been a strengthening of the position of Aer Lingus insofar as the country is concerned, both in terms of employment, connectivity, growth, potential for the future. When Aer Lingus was privatised back in 2006, a very weak situation was put in place with absolutely no guarantee of control or influence over either slot disposal or slot use or connectivity. So the decision of the Cabinet yesterday has been one that has enhanced the position from the original offer which was made to the Minister for Transport, and restores a degree of influence that was not there last week. And that was a restoration of authority which was handed away in the privatisation of Aer Lingus in 2006. You'll note, Deputy Martin, that all three airports, Shannon, Cork and Dublin, have endorsed the opportunity here to grow the airline, to increase employment and to keep Ireland's connectivity with the world in a very much stronger state than it's been. And obviously, as a fourth airport, Knock will have the opportunity to grow through the connections through Gatwick with the connections to IAG. So that's I didn't see the report, and neither did the Minister. And I'm confident, by the way, Deputy Martin, that the European Commission will approve and endorse the the proposal to dispose of the 25.1% share to IAG.
That wasn't the question I asked you in relation to the EU Commission. And you shouldn't tell untruths to the House, Taoiseach.
Sorry.
Because I would be familiar with the deal in 2005-2006. There's government memos in existence which your office showed to me in preparation for freedom of information. And the most detailed consideration was given to the slots in those memos, because I read them. So it's not good enough to come in, Taoiseach, and just use the usual stuff that you go on with. Oh, there was nothing there in terms of guarantees. There were. Now, I don't know why they weren't subsequently released. I don't understand that, but they weren't. And I've read those memos, Taoiseach. And I also am aware of informal contacts at that time with the EU Commission in terms of the government's capacity, single-handedly as a government, to actually veto the sale of slots on competition grounds. Okay? And that's the question I asked you. Is the Commission, was there any contact with the Commission in terms of the government's capacity, single-handedly as a government, to veto the shares? Now, what I want to put to you, Taoiseach, you said you are not aware of the NIRIS report. Now, the NIRIS report could potentially have a devastating effect on quality employment in Cork, Shannon and Dublin. And I find it extraordinary that the government has gone ahead with the sale, unaware, it appears, or maybe the Minister was aware of the contents of the report. But it is quite serious, Taoiseach.
Thank you.
In that it talks about substantial cuts in ground handling, catering, maintenance and moving heavy maintenance to Eastern Europe and outsourcing and so on. And we note the letter which the Minister notes as well in his speech from the IAG group. There are no guarantees in terms of jobs.
Thank you, Deputy.
But behind the scenes, Aer Lingus and IAG, this is what they're cooking up. And you haven't been told about it? Or the government hasn't been told about it? There was no mention of it in the Minister's speech. I raised it this morning at 9:30, hoping that I get some response from the government in relation to NIRIS, because I think we need to be clean and transparent and upfront with the public in terms of the real implications long-term, Taoiseach, in relation to this. Because Aer Lingus has grown over the last number of years since the decisions of 2006 and so on. So you might ask, and the Articles Association can change. There's no guarantees in relation to those.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Well, Deputy, you said you'd be familiar with the situation, and obviously you are familiar with the situation because obviously when Aer Lingus was privatised back in 2006, you make the point about the guarantees that were put in there. Well, when Aer Lingus shifted connections from Shannon to Belfast, they did so without any control from the state here. So you are familiar with that, and that's the weakness of the privatisation that you went through. The proposals now give the Minister for Finance of the day control and a veto over both the sale and the use of the slots, and the guarantee for the next 7 years in respect of the use of those slots. That's a much stronger position than was put in place when you privatised Aer Lingus, because as Deputy Dooley said, well, they were in trouble then, and that was sufficient to have a very much weaker deal. This is about growing the airline, about growing connectivity, about increasing jobs, about impact from the United States and 4 new routes and so on. And let me repeat, let me say to you, Deputy Martin, I have not had sight or content or any documentation presented about the internal Aer Lingus report that you refer to.
Thank you.
And neither has the Minister for Transport.
Thank you.
An internal Aer Lingus document. I haven't seen it or read about it or have not had access to it.
Thank you.